We all know the words, "The earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep." For centuries we have been taught this was the absolute beginning, an empty canvas waiting for the hand of God. But what if that isn't the whole truth? What if it wasn't a blank canvas, but the ruins of a forgotten world? This is not a new theory, but an ancient truth, one that has been quietly passed down in rabbinic commentaries and whispered about by the earliest church fathers. A truth so profound, it was deemed too complex, too dangerous for the masses. They spoke of a world before Adam, a primordial earth, full of life, that was laid to waste by a catastrophic rebellion in the heavens. A war so devastating it left creation broken, scarred, and drowned in darkness. But if this is true, why isn't it common knowledge? Why was this history erased? The answer may lie in a decision made nearly 2,000 years ago, by councils who feared this revelation would complicate the simple narrative of creation and the fall of man. They simplified the story, sealing away its deepest layers, ensuring Adam's sin was seen as the absolute beginning of all corruption. The evidence, however, was never fully destroyed. The clues remain, embedded in the very Hebrew words of Genesis, and echoed in the visions of prophets like Jeremiah and Isaiah. What you are about to discover will challenge everything you thought you knew about the 6 days of creation. If you are ready to uncover a truth that has been hidden for millennia, like this video and subscribe, because the gates of the forgotten Eden are about to open. The story we know begins in darkness, but the Bible itself asks a question that shatters this simple beginning. In the book of Job, God challenges Job, asking, "Where were you when I laid the foundation of the earth? When the morning stars sang together, and all the sons of God shouted for joy?" Think about those words. Who were these sons of God, these angelic beings, shouting for joy? And what were they celebrating? They were witnessing the founding of a perfect world, a world that existed before the darkness. This single verse reveals a monumental truth hidden in plain sight. An entire angelic host was present long before the first day of the Genesis account we read. This was not an empty void. It was a finished creation, so glorious that the heavens erupted in praise. So, the most important question is not what was created on day one, but what happened between that moment of joyful celebration and the desolation described in Genesis chapter 1 verse 2. What could have silenced the angels' song and plunged a perfect world into chaos? The answer is found not in what was added to the Bible, but in what was lost in translation. The original Hebrew text of Genesis chapter 1 verse 2 reads, "V'aratzi hayeta tohu vabohu." For centuries, this has been translated as, "The earth was without form and void." But the Hebrew verb hayeta can also mean became. The earth became a wasteland. It was not created that way. This was not a beginning. It was the aftermath. A divine act of judgment had occurred, leaving the original creation shattered. This forgotten catastrophe is the key. The prophets Isaiah and Jeremiah speak of this same desolation, using the exact same Hebrew words, tohu vabohu *, to describe the earth under God's judgment. They were not prophesying a new event, but recalling a primeval one. A heavenly rebellion, led by a powerful cherub, did not just scar the heavens. It laid waste to the physical earth, turning a vibrant, pre-Adamic world into the dark, watery ruin we find at the start of Genesis. The 6 days of creation were not an act of making something from nothing, but an act of glorious restoration. But where did the prophets Isaiah and Jeremiah draw this knowledge from? Their understanding didn't come from a vacuum. It came from a deep well of sacred tradition, including ancient texts that were widely read and respected by early believers, yet were later set aside. Writings that hold the missing chapter of our planet's history. One of the most significant of these is the Book of Enoch. Quoted by Jude in the New Testament itself, this text was considered scripture by many early church fathers. It describes in vivid detail the celestial order before Adam, the rebellion of a faction of angels, and the cataclysmic judgment that followed. Enoch speaks not of a spiritual fall alone, but of a physical corruption of the earth, a defilement so profound it required a divine cleansing, leaving the world shattered and submerged in a watery grave. This ancient account does not contradict Genesis. It provides the prologue that has been missing for centuries. The story from Enoch gives us the asterisk reason for the ruin we find in Genesis chapter 1, verse 2. The darkness wasn't a beginning, it was the result of a cosmic war. The formless void was the battlefield after the battle had been won. The 6 days of creation, then, become an even more profound miracle. Not just creation, but a recreation, a divine act of reclamation from the ashes of a fallen angelic age. So if these texts were known to the apostles and early believers, why were they removed? Why is this story not taught in our churches? The answer lies in a series of decisions made by early church councils. In their effort to create a simple, unified doctrine, they streamlined the story of creation. They feared these deeper truths about a pre-Adamic judgment would complicate the narrative of Adam's original sin. And so, the story was simplified. The first chapter was torn out, and the history of the first earth was deliberately forgotten. Imagine for a moment the world that was, not the world of Adam but the earth that existed before the darkness fell. Ancient texts and rabbinic traditions paint a picture of a primordial creation, governed not by man but by the celestial beings Job called the sons of God. This was a world under the stewardship of a magnificent cherub, Lucifer, the light-bearer, who presided over a creation of unimaginable beauty. It was a kingdom of light, order, and perfect harmony between the heavens and the earth. But this perfect order was shattered by an act of cosmic treason. The guardian cherub, filled with pride, sought to ascend above his station. As described in the prophecies of Isaiah and Ezekiel, he declared, "I will make myself like the Most High." This was not merely a spiritual disagreement, it was an open declaration of war. A rebellion that raged across the heavens and spilled onto the physical earth, corrupting the very fabric of creation. The judgment that followed was swift and absolute. The world that Lucifer was meant to protect was laid to waste, drowned under a deluge of divine justice, and became the dark, watery chaos of Genesis chapter 1, verse 2. By erasing this catastrophic event from our common understanding, the very nature of evil was redefined. We were taught that sin began with a bite of fruit. But this hidden history reveals a far older, more powerful darkness that was already present, waiting for an opportunity. The fall of Adam was not the introduction of sin into a perfect world, but the surrendering of a newly reclaimed world back to an ancient enemy. This omission changes the entire narrative of redemption. It means the story of mankind is not the beginning of the war, but a pivotal battle within it. This transforms our understanding of Adam's purpose. He was not simply a gardener. He was a king, placed in a restored sanctuary, the Garden of Eden, which served as God's holy beachhead on a planet scarred by a fallen angel. His mandate was to tend and keep the garden, but the original Hebrew implies a deeper meaning, to worship and to guard. He was to guard this reclaimed territory from the primordial darkness that still lurked outside its gates. Adam was the first soldier in the reclamation of a lost world, a truth that gives his mission, his failure, and our salvation a far more profound and urgent meaning. For centuries, you have been taught a simple and powerful story. God spoke, and out of nothing, the universe appeared. The earth was a formless void, a blank slate upon which he painted his masterpiece. This is the tradition we have all inherited, a story of pure creation. But the truth we are uncovering tonight is not one of creation from nothing, but of restoration from ruin. It suggests the 6 days of Genesis were not the first draft, but a divine reclamation of a world already ancient, a world that had fallen into judgment and darkness long before Adam took his first breath. So why would such a monumental truth be hidden? Why is this not the story proclaimed from every pulpit? The answer is not born of conspiracy, but of a deep, protective concern. The early church fathers faced an overwhelming task to forge a simple, unified faith for a world drowning in complex mythologies. They believed that revealing the full story of a pre-Adamic rebellion, a cosmic war, and a shattered first earth would create more questions than answers. They feared it would sow doubt in the minds of new believers, complicating the clear and simple message of salvation. The decision was made, in councils and scholarly debates lost to time, to streamline the narrative. The focus had to be on Adam, on his sin as the singular entry point of corruption into a perfect world. This made the solution, the sacrifice of Christ, clean and direct. Texts that spoke too vividly of the world before, like the Book of Enoch, were set aside. Not because they were false, but because they were considered too profound, too dangerous for a young and fragile faith. The story of creation was intentionally simplified to protect the faithful. But in their effort to build a fortress around the faith, they inadvertently buried one of its deepest foundations. By removing the prologue of the cosmic war, the true scale of God's redemptive plan was obscured. We were left with a story that begins in a peaceful garden, instead of one that begins on a reclaimed battlefield. This changes everything. It means the serpent was not an intruder in a perfect world, but a defeated enemy attempting to retake lost ground. And it means Adam's mission was far greater than we ever imagined. This forgotten truth does more than just add a chapter to our history. It reframes the entire plan of God. Salvation is no longer just a rescue mission from a single mistake in a garden. It becomes a cosmic campaign of reclamation, a war that has been raging since before the foundations of our world were restored. Your faith, your struggles, your victories, they are not isolated events. They are part of a divine strategy to take back what was lost, to reclaim a kingdom from an ancient usurper. This understanding transforms the Bible from a history book into a war manual, and it positions you, the believer, as a soldier in the most important conflict in all of creation. Perhaps this knowledge was kept hidden for a time, waiting for a generation that would not be shaken by its depth. In an age of easy answers, many seek comfort over truth. But you are here because you seek something more. You have felt that there were deeper currents running beneath the surface of the stories you were taught. This revelation is not meant to shatter your faith, but to solidify it in bedrock. It is a truth for those who are ready to move beyond the shallow waters and embrace the profound, awe-inspiring reality of God's eternal purpose. You were meant to understand this. This is the antidote to a faith that has become too simple, too safe. Many today feel a spiritual emptiness, a sense that the modern message is missing a vital piece. This is that piece. It explains the sheer intensity of the spiritual warfare we feel, the deep-seated nature of evil, and the incredible stakes of our daily choices. We are not just tending a garden, we are guarding a frontier. We are participants in a conflict that began in eternity past, and our role is far more critical than we have been led to believe. Understanding this ancient war is the key to understanding the enemy we face today. The serpent's tactics in the garden were not new. They were the same strategies of pride and rebellion he used in the world before. By recognizing the true origin of this conflict, we can finally comprehend the nature of the battle we are in. The Bible gives us the blueprint for victory, a plan that began not with Adam, but with the very first act of divine restoration in the darkness. But this raises an even deeper question. When God said, "Let there be light," on the first day of restoration, what light was he calling forth? The sun and moon were not formed until the fourth day. The light of day one was something different, something more fundamental. Ancient scripture suggests this was not the creation of physical light, but the return of a divine light, the very presence of God's glory, reigniting a world that had been plunged into a spiritual as well as physical darkness. If this divine light was restored, and the Garden of Eden was its sacred center, then we must ask the most startling question of all. Was Eden built upon the ruins of something even older? Could the sanctuary given to Adam have been a reclamation of a primordial garden from the world before? A celestial outpost on earth, once governed by Lucifer himself, before his pride turned it into the epicenter of his rebellion? What secrets did the soil of Eden hold long before Adam was formed from its dust? This thought changes how we read the description of Eden forever. The four rivers, the land of Havilah with its gold and onyx stone, these are not merely geographical markers. They are echoes. They are patterns of a pre-Adamic world, hints of a splendor that was shattered. This implies God's restoration was not a random act of creation, but a precise and symbolic reclamation. He was rebuilding his holy mountain on the very ground where the first treason took place, planting a garden as a statement of his ultimate authority. What you are beginning to see is that the story of Genesis is layered. Beneath the history of mankind lies the forgotten history of the angels. And beneath the Garden of Eden lies the shadow of a garden that was lost. Uncovering the truth of this first sanctuary is not just about understanding the past. It is the key to understanding God's final plan for the future, for the New Jerusalem itself. The beginning holds the secret to the end. This is the theological key that unlocks the entire Bible. For centuries, we have viewed God primarily as the Creator, the one who spoke and brought all things into being from nothing. And He is that. But this hidden history reveals an even more profound aspect of His character. He is the divine restorer, the one who steps into ruin, into chaos and darkness, and reclaims it for His glory. The 6 days of creation are not just a story of power, but a story of redemption. The ultimate act of taking what an enemy had broken and making it new again. This reframes the very purpose of humanity. We were not an afterthought, created to fill a beautiful but empty world. Mankind was God's answer. Our creation was a direct response to the angelic rebellion. Where a cherub fell through pride, God raised up a new creation from the dust, made in His own image, to rule and have dominion. The existence of Adam was a declaration to all of the heavens that God's purpose would not be thwarted by treason. We are not the start of the story, but the start of the victory lap. This knowledge does not destroy faith, it completes it. It fills the gaps that so many have felt in their spirit, answering questions we were told not to ask. Why is the world so full of ancient evil? Why does spiritual warfare feel so intense? Because we were born onto a battlefield, placed here as agents of a divine reclamation project that began before time as we know it. This truth doesn't diminish the cross. It magnifies it, showing it to be the ultimate victory in a war that has spanned ages. Therefore, the story you were taught is not wrong, it was simply incomplete. It was a story told in 2 dimensions, and now you can see the third. You are not a descendant of a failed gardener. You are an heir to a king, placed on this earth to continue the work of guarding and reclaiming God's territory. This understanding moves your faith from a defensive position to an offensive one, empowering you with the knowledge of who you truly are in God's cosmic plan. And now, we arrive at the final, most profound truth, the one that this entire hidden history has been leading to. If God restored a ruined world before He ever formed man from the dust, it means He was already moving against an ancient darkness. This reveals that the plan of salvation was not a reaction to Adam's fall. It was an eternal strategy, set in motion before the foundations of the restored world were even laid. The Bible itself declares this. It speaks of a purpose, a grace, given to us in Christ Jesus before the beginning of time. Suddenly, the book of Genesis reads differently. It is no longer the story of a perfect plan that went wrong. It is the story of a cosmic war and humanity's enlistment into it. The promise of a coming Redeemer, given to Adam and Eve in the shadow of their failure, was not a hastily devised Plan B. It was the first human unveiling of a divine counteroffensive that had been planned in the heart of God for ages. Every law, Every sacrifice, every prophecy that followed was not just pointing forward to a future event, but backward to an eternal decree. This is the ultimate revelation. The entire narrative points to one person, Jesus Christ. He is, as the book of Revelation calls him, the Lamb slain from the foundation of the world. His sacrifice was not an emergency measure. It was the preordained masterstroke in God's reclamation of creation. The restoration of light in Genesis chapter 1 was a physical echo of the true light of the world who was to come. The garden reclaimed from ruin was a foreshadowing of the hearts Christ would reclaim from sin. His victory on the cross was not just over Adam's sin, but over the ancient rebellion that started it all. Therefore, your faith is anchored in a plan far older and grander than you ever knew. You are not a descendant of a tragic accident, but a child of a divine purpose. The story of creation, ruin, and restoration is not just about the planet. It is the story of your own soul. God is the divine restorer, and His work in you is a continuation of the same glorious reclamation that began in the darkness of Genesis, all to prove one eternal truth. Where darkness once reigned, His light will always have the final word. Let this truth settle deep within your spirit. The God you serve is not only the creator of a perfect world, but the divine restorer of a broken one. Your own journey of faith, with its struggles and victories, is a mirror of this cosmic story. You were not born into a peaceful garden, but onto a reclaimed battlefield, and your purpose is far greater than you were ever led to believe. This is the bedrock of a faith that cannot be shaken. For centuries, this profound understanding was sealed away, deemed too complex for the simple narrative. A chapter of our origin story was intentionally forgotten, leaving a void that many have felt but could not name. But we believe that in these times, God is pulling back the veil. What was hidden for ages is now being revealed to a generation hungry for a deeper truth, a generation ready to grasp the full scope of His eternal plan. If this truth burns in your heart and awakens a new sense of purpose within you, show your support. Leave a like on this video, subscribe to the channel, and activate the notification bell. By doing so, you ensure you will not miss the next chapter of the truths being uncovered. We now have a members area for those who feel called to partner with us in this ministry. By becoming a member, you bless this work and help us continue producing, edifying, and revealing content like this. And finally, we want to know where this message is reaching. Please, take a moment to comment below with the name of the city you are watching from. We are honored to be on this journey of discovery with you.